They wanted it fast, quiet, clean. But one line in my resignation shattered the silence and made their own legal team afraid to speak without counsel. The office lights had that sterile buzz again, the kind that made your skin itch even when the air conditioning was off. I had memorized every flicker in the ceiling panels over my desk, every smudge on the window next to the CFO's corner suite. And yet, nothing prepared me for what HR called an urgent conversation at 3:12 p.m. on a Tuesday. I walked into the glass-walled room, shoes silent on the gray carpet, and 3 people were already seated. Melissa from HR, Lucas from legal, and Rebecca, the CFO herself. None of them offered a smile. That's when I noticed the manila envelope on the table. Thick, official, ominous. "Please take a seat," Melissa said, voice trained in neutrality. Lucas adjusted his tie. "This will be brief. You're being given the opportunity to resign today." The phrase echoed like a misfired gunshot in my chest. Opportunity? I glanced at Rebecca. Her lips were pursed, hands folded, face blank. No explanation. No numbers, no fault, just pressure wrapped in protocol. "If you don't," Lucas added, "the company will proceed with termination for misalignment with expectations. It's in your best interest to cooperate." HR pressure in full display. I kept my breath even. "And what exactly have I misaligned with?" Melissa glanced down. Lucas cleared his throat. Rebecca finally spoke. "We're restructuring. Your role no longer fits the company's vision. A resignation letter avoids complications for both parties." There it was. No performance issues, no breach, just a corporate cleanse, a sanitized ousting. They pushed a blank resignation template toward me. "You can fill it out now," said Lucas, "or send it to us by end of day. We'll process it immediately once received." I looked at the pen. It wasn't just ink anymore. It was a weapon. Or a shield, depending on who held it. 2 floors down, my team was probably sharing lunch around the break room table. They didn't know that upstairs, my identity was being dissolved behind closed doors, masked as professional courtesy. I took the paper, but didn't sign. Not yet. I asked one question. "What happens if I don't?" Lucas answered too fast. "Then we initiate termination proceedings. You'll lose access, benefits, and potentially your severance." So that was the lever. The settlement term. They were dangling it like a carrot, hoping I'd leap. Back at my desk, I reread the contract I'd signed 4 years ago. And that's when I saw it. A quiet clause buried in Section 9.2. It mentioned financial closure upon mutual settlement in the case of voluntary resignation. It required CFO sign off. No one in that room had mentioned that. The next morning, I opened a blank email to HR, typed a single sentence, attached the PDF, subject, resignation, body, effective upon full settlement, and clicked send. They wanted clean. I gave them clean and with a legal fuse. She handed them the letter. But in 6 days, they'd wish she hadn't. Silence can be louder than fury, especially in corporate corridors. I sent that resignation at 9:07 a.m. on a Wednesday. By 9:12, I received the auto reply from HR. No personal note, no reaction, no immediate call. Just stillness. That was the first sign something had gone wrong, but not on my end. At 10:34, my inbox pinged again, this time from payroll. "We've received your resignation and are initiating final disbursement." There was no mention of terms, no figures, no document to confirm what full settlement would mean. I waited. By noon, IT locked me out of Zoom and Slack. My access badge stopped blinking green, but the company intranet still listed my name under Strategic Operations. Interesting. At 4:42 p.m., I got a text from Jordan, a colleague in finance. "Hey, just got CC'd on an email about your exit. Are you suing them or something?" CFO looks pale as hell. I hadn't spoken to Jordan in weeks. If even she had noticed tension upstairs, it wasn't just paranoia. The next day, I got the call. It was Rebecca, the same CFO who didn't flinch during my forced resignation talk. But now, her tone was off, careful, curious. "We just wanted to confirm the intent behind your letter," she said. "Effective upon full settlement. Could you clarify what you meant? I let her sit in the silence for a beat. Sure, I replied. Just that. Once all financial obligations are fulfilled, accrued PTO, severance, bonuses earned to date, reimbursements, all of it. I could hear the scratch of her pen. Right, of course. But the contract said something else, something they hadn't expected I'd ever read. According to clause 9.2, voluntary resignation effective upon full settlement created a trigger. If not fulfilled, the resignation was incomplete, meaning I hadn't legally separated yet. Meaning, if they processed my final pay without CFO sign-off, they risked breach of contract. Meaning, I could sue. By Friday, legal was involved. I got a formal notice requesting a meeting to align expectations regarding your resignation timeline and settlement. They were spiraling, not because of what I wrote, but because they didn't know what they had agreed to by not reading it first. That weekend, Jordan texted again. Just saw the legal team book a 90-minute call on Sunday. You broke something, didn't you? I just smiled. I hadn't broken anything. I'd read what they hadn't. She gave them one line. Now the CFO needed a lawyer to understand it. Ever had to outsmart your employer just to protect your rights? Drop a comment. Your story might help someone fight smarter. The Monday morning sun filtered through my kitchen blinds like an interrogation lamp. I wasn't used to working from home, or rather, existing in a limbo between being employed and being erased. HR had still not sent confirmation of settlement. No timeline, no calculations, just polite deflections and vague in-review messages. Meanwhile, they had already disabled my logins. That was their first procedural mistake. By 11 a.m., I drafted a formal email titled, Request for Status, Outstanding Items per Clause, 9.2. I copied HR, Payroll, Legal, and, intentionally, the CFO. In it, I listed every line item from the contract. Remaining paid time off, unused annual wellness stipend, retroactive bonus from Q2, stock option vesting confirmation, final severance per voluntary exit clause. I signed off with a calm reminder. As per my submitted resignation, effectiveness is pending full settlement. Until then, I remain contractually bound and employed. Kindly advise. Within 47 minutes, legal responded. They requested a Zoom meeting to review ambiguities. Ambiguities? I quoted their own language, but I agreed. I had no intention of dodging. I wanted it all recorded. That call was a performance. The lawyer, a woman named Celeste, looked like she hadn't slept. Beside her, Lucas, the same man who pressured me to resign, now sat with his camera off. Celeste cleared her throat. We're unclear on what you consider full settlement. Could you elaborate? I did, calmly, deliberately, with screen shares. I read their definitions back to them from the onboarding contract and exit policy PDFs. They had never expected me to read page 17, but I had. Twice. Celeste shifted. I see. That's a broad interpretation. It's your language, I replied, not mine. Then I dropped the last piece. The employee handbook stated that any resignation labeled conditional upon financial completion paused access removal until settlement cleared, meaning cutting my access last week. Violation, meaning my badge deactivation. Another breach, meaning their early move invalidated my resignation, for now. Celeste scribbled something off camera. I'll escalate this internally, she murmured. I closed the call with a smile. Of course. Let me know once full terms are met. Until then, I'll await access reinstatement or formal breach documentation. They had wanted quick compliance. What they got was contractual resistance, armed with their own policies. And they weren't ready. By Tuesday, the company's tone had shifted, but not their actions. I still had no reinstated access, no formal payout schedule, no breakdown of what they deemed full settlement. What I did have was leverage and receipts. Every HR pressure tactic they'd used was now documented. Every misstep, from the coerced choice to resign to the early systems lockout, was recorded and archived. I even had the audio transcript from my Zoom call with legal, courtesy of a built-in setting they forgot to disable when revoking my screen share. At 9:53 a.m., I sent a single-page letter to legal. This time, siwating someone new, the external auditor listed in the company's last compliance bulletin. Subject: Request for neutral review, settlement delay and policy deviation. In the body, I outlined timeline of resignation under Clause 9.2 unsettled financial items, unauthorized revocation of access prior to settlement, HR refusal to provide written definitions of full settlement. It wasn't a threat. It was an observation, one the auditor could not ignore. By 1:15 p.m., I got a call. It was not from HR, not from legal. It was from the Director of Risk and Ethics. "Hi, I'd like to understand your experience," he began. His voice was calm, but beneath it, urgency pulsed. I recognized the subtext. "We're not sure how much you've uncovered." I laid it out cleanly. I spoke of the clause, the locked access, the financial limbo, the employee rights outlined in their own settlement handbook that had been violated. There was a pause. Then, "We'd like to offer you a formal reconciliation agreement with immediate compensation." Interesting wording. Reconciliation. They weren't admitting fault, but they were ready to pay. I requested a written draft for review. Also, I added, it should come signed. CFO sign-off is required per our original contract. A beat of silence. Then, understood. 2 hours later, I received a draft. It was 5 pages long. Attached was a spreadsheet outlining every line item, time-stamped and signed. But something was missing. They'd forgotten to include the stock options, the same ones that were halfway through vesting. I replied with a single comment in the margin. Clause 7.3, prorated equity upon voluntary departure with non-compete upheld. Please revise. The document was back in my inbox by 6:17 p.m., corrected, recalculated, and this time, initialed by the CFO herself. They were scrambling to wrap this up, and I was just getting started. Wednesday began with coffee and calm, the kind of calm that only comes when you flip the table without raising your voice. By now, I had 3 things they didn't expect: a signed reconciliation draft, an itemized breakdown of what they owed, their CFO's initials on a document that confirmed every breach they swore didn't happen, but I hadn't signed anything yet. At 10:22 a.m., I received a ping from a private number. It was a text, short, desperate. "We need to close this by EOD. Please review and confirm signature." No name, no title. But the tone? Panic. They weren't trying to settle anymore. They were trying to stop something. I didn't respond. Instead, I booked a 15-minute consult with an employment rights attorney I'd found through a nonprofit site. She read everything: the resignation, the contract, the policy PDFs, the reconciliation draft, in complete silence. When she finally looked up, her expression was half admiration, half disbelief. "You threaded the needle," she said. "This clause, most people overlook it, but here, they've already admitted liability by drafting this." She pointed to the CFO's signature. "That makes this enforceable. You could walk away with more, or file for breach and let the board see this in discovery." It wasn't about money anymore. It was about record, about precedent. I told her I wanted everything paid in full, not a penny less, and that I'd sign only once I had a notarized payment schedule and confirmation of all direct deposits, including the stock payout. She smiled. Then they're cornered. At 3:08 p.m., I sent my reply. I acknowledge receipt of the draft. My final signature will be provided upon receipt of the complete settlement documentation, including all funds disbursed. As per Clause 9.2, the resignation becomes effective only upon fulfillment. No warmth, no emotion, just precision. At 3:41, the CFO herself replied, 3 lines, no greeting. Understood. Payment will be processed today, confirming all items. We request no further internal communication or external disclosures. Please consider this confidential. That last part made me laugh. They were trying to wrap it in silence, but the document had already spoken louder than any lawyer. I waited, not for permission, for the deposits. And they came, one after the other. PTO, bonus, stipends, equity, severance, all of it. They'd wanted her quiet. Instead, they funded her exit like a settlement. Thursday morning arrived with a message no one expected, not even me. An envelope slid into my mailbox just after 9 a.m. It was thick, hand-delivered, no sender on the outside, but the return address? The company's legal department. Inside, a final release form, a non-disclosure agreement, and a cover letter. This time not from HR, not from legal, but from the CEO's office. The letter was short, stripped of corporate flourish. We thank you for your years of service. We acknowledge that the situation could have been handled more thoughtfully. We trust that with this settlement, we can all move forward in good faith. Please find enclosed our final terms for closure. They weren't asking anymore. They were pleading, politely. But the NDA? That was the real message. 10 pages, dense with clauses. It forbade disclosure of the nature of my departure, the existence of the reconciliation agreement, any prior HR correspondence, any mention of Clause 9.2 in future professional engagements. In other words, forget this ever happened. Bury the paper trail. I sat with it, quietly. Then I called the attorney again. She laughed, not in surprise, but recognition. It's a standard move. They want closure, clean, sealed closure. But is it enforceable? She flipped through it. Only if you sign, and even then, some of it wouldn't hold in court. But that's not the point. They're testing your limits. She leaned forward. You've already won. The question now is, do you want to frame the win or erase the war? That night, I drafted my own one-page response, not emotional, not combative, just clear. I acknowledge receipt of your documents. I will not be signing any agreement that attempts to suppress policy-level misconduct or obscure employee rights as outlined in our contract. I consider the matter settled financially. Legally, I reserve the right to respond to any inquiries truthfully and in accordance with labor protections. I hit send. No hesitation. They'd paid. They'd lost control, and now they couldn't even buy my silence. The message was simple. I wasn't afraid of their lawyer, because I'd already made my own signature mean something. Friday dawned with something strange in the air. Not tension, not dread. Something lighter. Freedom, maybe. I no longer woke up with a phone full of HR reminders or unread Slack messages. No more Zoom invites with passive-aggressive agendas. The digital leash was gone. But there was one thing I still hadn't done. Tell my team. The people who had worked beside me, lunched with me, celebrated wins, and vented losses. They hadn't heard from me since the so-called departure. Corporate had framed it as a mutual separation to pursue new opportunities. Classic euphemism, like calling a fire an unplanned temperature adjustment. At 10:04 a.m., I sent them a single email. Subject: thank you. And the truth. Hey everyone, I didn't get a chance to say this properly. I was asked to resign, not for performance, not for ethics, but because someone higher up decided my position no longer fit their vision. I complied, on my terms, and I protected every cent owed, because the law was on my side, even if HR pretended it wasn't. Read your contracts. Know your rights, ask questions, even the uncomfortable ones. I'm not bitter. I'm not afraid. I'm just done letting silence protect the wrong people. Stay sharp. Her name. I didn't expect replies, but they came anyway. From Jordan. Legend. From Clara in Design. You're the reason I'm pulling my file tonight. Thank you. From Raphael in IT. They tried to ghost you. You wrote a ghost story back. Each one was a quiet exhale. Proof that corporate narratives aren't bulletproof, not when truth gets a keyboard. That evening, I got a final message, a LinkedIn request from a recruiter. Subject line: saw how you handled your exit. We should talk. And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was leverage. Because the moment you stop begging for a seat at their table, you start building your own. The weekend arrived like an exhale I didn't know I'd been holding. No pings, no NDAs, no CFOs hiding behind just to clarify emails. Just quiet, the honest kind. Not the threatening kind. I sat by the window with a notebook and a cup of coffee that hadn't been reheated 3 times. For the first time in months, I wasn't surviving a job. I was watching it disappear in the rearview mirror, smaller, less scary, and finally out of reach. But that didn't mean I was done. At 11:17 a.m., I received a LinkedIn message, this time from someone unexpected. Tara. a former colleague from a different department. We had worked together briefly during a budgeting sprint a year ago. Heard what happened. Just so you know, your resignation clause is being discussed in risk meetings now. You broke the algorithm. Thank you. I read it twice, then smiled. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even validation. It was a ripple. Later that day, I went to a co-working space and started sketching ideas for a workshop. The invisible armor, what HR doesn't expect you to know. Because I knew there were more people like me. People pushed toward exits with language polished to sound like favors. People who didn't know that resignation letters can hold power, if written right. That settlement terms aren't favors, they're obligations. That employee rights don't end when the badge stops blinking. I wasn't starting a crusade, I was just telling the truth. And sometimes that's enough to crack open a system that relies on silence. I jotted down the first slide. They said, "Just sign this." I said, "After you settle every word." My story wasn't unique, and that was exactly the problem. But maybe, just maybe, it could help someone else write one sentence that changes everything. Monday came, not with dread, but direction. It had been 11 days since I typed that sentence. 11 days since they tried to silence me with a blank form and a polite threat. 11 days since I used their own words, effective upon full settlement, and watched a system built on compliance unravel one ignored clause at a time. Now I was somewhere else entirely, not just physically, though I was no longer tied to a desk with flickering panels and air that hummed like exhaustion. Mentally, emotionally, even legally, I had stepped outside the machine, but the imprint of it lingered. I found myself scanning the news that morning, an article about quiet firings, a thread on NDA abuse, a post about employees leaving gracefully, code for leaving silently. I couldn't scroll past anymore. I opened a blank document, titled it, Guide, What to Write When They Ask You to Quit. It began not with legalese or emotion, just a sentence. Your resignation is the only document they don't proofread. Make it count. I started outlining everything I'd learned, what questions to ask when they say it's voluntary, how to spot the pressure tactics in HR's language, why the CFO sign-off matters more than the goodbye cake, and most importantly, how to write a sentence that doesn't just fold, one that holds. By noon, I'd finished the draft. I didn't pitch it to publishers. I didn't gate it behind a paywall. I posted it freely and quietly. Within 24 hours, it had 2,800 shares. Within 72, I received emails from people in Brazil, Germany, South Africa. Some had already quit. Some were being pushed. Some had just opened their contracts for the first time and started reading. That's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not applause, just awareness, weaponized. The company never reached out again. They'd paid, signed, and buried, but I hadn't. I'd planted. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is read the fine print and write your own. It was late. Not just the hour, but the season. Leaves clung to trees in defiance, and the city hummed with that autumn sharpness that makes everything feel personal. I walked past the old office building one last time, not to reminisce, just to confirm it was real. The lights on the 11th floor were still on. Same buzz, same tinted glass. But I no longer flinched when I saw it. Inside those walls, they had tried to erase me with a polite threat and a preloaded resignation form. Instead, I had written my terms, turned their silence into my sentence, and made their lawyer ask me for clarity. I stopped across the street and pulled out my phone. There it was, a message from a woman I didn't know. Subject, Clause 9.2 saved me. Hi, I saw your guide. I used your sentence. They tried to fire me quietly. I sent one line, and now legal won't process it without full payout. I just wanted to say thank you. You don't know me, but you helped me stay whole. I read it once, then again, then closed my eyes. She was right. I didn't know her, but I knew the feeling she carried, that flicker of dignity after weeks of doubt, that quiet triumph that doesn't need applause, only acknowledgement. I walked home slowly, not because I was tired, but because I could. No more HR calls, no more blurred lines, no more playing nice with people who confuse courtesy with compliance. I wasn't the same person they tried to corner in that glass room. I was sharper now, And strangely, softer too, because knowing your worth doesn't harden you, it frees you. So if you ever find yourself in that chair with the manila envelope and the forced smile, remember, you don't owe them silence. You owe yourself the truth. And sometimes the most powerful sentence is the one they didn't see coming.